Welcome friends to today's session of live lectures. For this session we have with us Dr. Namita Rajput. Friends, Dr. Rajput is Principal in Sri Aurobindo College Evening under Delhi University. She's been a part of teaching fraternity for a long time, and she has contributed a lot with her teaching skills and teaching pedagogy to students and through our live lectures as well. Friends, today's topic of discussion is Ministry of Corporate Affairs and Corporate Social Responsibility. Today we are discussing the principles or the policies being prepared in Ministry of Corporate Affairs in regards to the corporate social responsibilities. Friends, let's welcome Dr. Rajput and let's get a deeper insight into this topic. We welcome you, Dr. Rajput, and please put some insight into this topic.
Good morning, friends. Today we have a very important topic which is relating to Ministry of Corporate Affairs rules relating to corporate social responsibility. As you all know, the corporate social responsibility is a buzzword, which means that you are supposed to return back to the society. It is because of the society that the corporates are earning. You have a good penetration in the market, you are having good sales and turnover in the market. It is all because of the society. So it is the prime responsibility of the corporates also to give back to the society. So that is what we call it as a corporate social responsibility. As a matter of fact, the corporate social responsibility is something relating to the society, its various stakeholders, because nowadays there is so much of awareness in relation to corporate social responsibility that you cannot take the society, on a bay. That means whatever society demands, because of which you are earning, because of which you are planted, you cannot ignore the responsibilities of yours towards the various stakeholders of the society. And this is what the CSR is all about. Now, as a matter of fact, before 2013 Companies Act, it was not mandatory for the corporates to do the CSR. And as a matter of fact, the companies which were doing the corporate social responsibility were their own voluntary requirements. And there were certain voluntary requirements which was passed in way back in 2009, which many of the companies used to give importance, because there are so many empirical evidences to this effect that the companies which are into the voluntary corporate social responsibility, be it the medical sector, be it the education sector, and there are about more than 10 to 15 sectors which they used to take and serve the society as a part of CSR policy. But the trend was not so prevalent, because in India we say that unless and until it becomes a mandate, the people try to ignore because they have a lust for a lot of profits. So in light of this, there were few studies, research studies which were conducted to find out that the corporates which are doing a lot of corporate social responsibility, is there an impact on the profits also, and vice versa. That means the companies who are earning a lot of profit, are they doing the CSR? So a two-way relationship was tested empirically, taking into consideration the CSR expenditure and basically the net profits, and a lot of econometric techniques and the statistical techniques were used to find out a two-way relationship between the two. But most of it, the results are of three categories. One, this was before 2013 the Companies Act, and so the results which were very different at the various parameters, but basically we can categorize into three categories. One, there was no relationship found, significant relationship was found in the CSR and the profits. Number two, there was a positive relationship between the two, and the third, there was a negative relationship between the two, because the negative relationship, it gives a lot of information about the companies which are doing a lot of work for the society. They are diluting the profits. So that was the argument behind it. But the positive response was found, and the argument which was given, that the companies which are doing a lot of activities in relation to the service given to the society owns them, the society gives them a good kind of a place in the market. They used to buy a lot of products, and hence the more CSR they used to do, the more profits they used to earn. So, this was the background and the backdrop which I wanted to share as far as the CSR rules were concerned, the voluntary guidelines of 2009 was concerned. But the moment the Companies Act was passed in 2013, there was some mandate which was passed by Ministry of Corporate Affairs in relation to the CSR activities, and the activities of the CSR are now mandatory, and there are certain bylaws which we will discuss as and when we move on with the presentation. So let me now discuss the Ministry of Corporate Affairs rules in relation to CSR. The GSR 129, in exercise of the power conferred under the section 135 and the subsections 1 and 2 of the section 469 of the Companies Act 2013, 18 of 2013, the central government hereby makes the following rules in relation to CSR. First, the short title and commencement. These rules may be called the Company's Corporate Social Responsibility Rules of 2014. Now, they shall come into force from the first day of the April 2014. So, if you see the present scenario, the rules are already under play. People are the corporates in relation to the corporate affair policy of the CSR. Everyone has to comply to the rules because they are already under place from the first day of April 2014. There are certain definitions which have been shared. The first is the rules unless the context otherwise requires. The Act means the Companies Act 2013. It is important to mention here that under the preliminary discussion which I gave you, it was it's a landmark year of 2013 Companies Act that the particular concept of the CSR has been now been a mandate. It is compulsory for the corporates to follow the rules which are a part of the Companies Act 2013, but earlier to this, prior to this, there were some guidelines which were purely voluntary in 2009, and there were very few companies, but yes, everybody had this particular criteria that the companies who were following the CSR, they were having a deep positive impact on the profits. So, on this pretext, there were some amendments which were made in the rules, and the Companies Act 2013 came out with a new act in relation to the CSR, and the provisions which were passed into Companies Act 2013 is now a part and parcel, and it's already under play from 1st of April 2014. Now, there are certain annexures, which means the annexed appended to these rules. Now, let us see the definitions. The first is, what is the concept of CSR? The corporate social responsibility means and includes but is not limited to the projects or the programs relating to the activities specified in Schedule 7 of the Act. Now, what are projects? The projects or the programs relating to the activities undertaken by the Board of Directors of the recommendations of the CSR Committee of the Board as per declared CSR policy of the company, subjected to the condition that such policy will cover the subjects enumerated in Schedule 7 of the Act. The CSR Committee, what does it mean? It means the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee of the Board referred to in section 135 of the Act. The CSR policy relates to the activities to be undertaken by the company as specified in Schedule 7 of the Act and the expenditure thereon, excluding the activities undertaken in pursuance of the normal course of the business of a company. Now, what is the concept of a net profit? Because as I said, there is a very close relationship between the net profits and the CSR expenditure. Because unless and until a company is on a sustainable grounds, how will it spend on the profits? How will it spend on the company, the corporate social responsibility, or towards the welfare of the society? So, for a company to be on a sustainable level, to earn the profits sustainably, it is very important for the company to earn profits to sustain the act of CSR. Unless and until the company earns a good amount of profit, a sustainable amount of profits, it will not be able to do anything for the society. Now coming on to the concept of what net profits are. The net profit means the net profit of a company as per its financial statements prepared in accordance with the applicable provisions of the Act, but shall not include the following, namely, any profits arising from any overseas branch or the branches of the company, whether operated as a separate company or the company otherwise. Now, it also includes any dividend received from the company in India which are covered under the complying with the provisions of Section 135 of the Act, provided the net profits in respect of a financial year for which the relevant financial statements were prepared in accordance with the provisions of the Companies Act 1956, 1 of 1956 shall not be required to recalculate in accordance with the provisions of the Act. Provided further that in case of a foreign company covered under these rules, the net profit means the net profit of such company as per profit and loss prepared in terms of clause A of subsection 1 of section 381 read with section 198 of the Act. The words and expressions used and not defined in these rules but defined in the Act shall have the same meanings respectively assigned to them in the Act. Every company, including its holding and subsidiary and a foreign company defined under the clause 42 of section 2 of the Act having the branch office or a project. There are some offices in India which fulfills the criteria specified in subsection 1 of section 135 of the Act shall comply with the provisions of section 135 Act and these rules. So for now we have seen there are so many rules and the regulations which are available as far as the Act is concerned. So let me give you a recap of the definitions which we have seen so far. So the first of it was a corporate social responsibility, which means any kind of a project or a program which is entailed under the Schedule 7 of the Act, and it could be any program in which the directors are in pursuance through a recommendation of a CSR committee in relation to CSR policy, subject to condition that the policy will cover the subjects enumerated in section 7 of the Act. The CSR committee has to be formed under section 135 of the Act, wherein the corporate social responsibility committee of the board is referred to in section 135 of the Act. The CSR policy every company has to make. Now what is this? The CSR policy relates to the activities to be undertaken by the committee as specified in Schedule 7 of the Act and the expenditure thereon, expenditure activities in relation to the normal pursuance in the course of the business. The net profits means the net profit of a company as per the financial statements prepared in accordance with the applicable provisions of the Act, but shall not be including the following, namely any profit arising from any of the overseas bank or the branches of the company, whether operated separately or otherwise, any dividend received from any other companies in India which are covered under the complying of section 135 of the Act. And provided the net profit in relation to a financial year for which the relevant financial year statements prepared in accordance with the provisions of the Act of 1956, 1 of 1956 shall not be required to recalculate in accordance with the provisions of the Act. Now further we started with the concept of a foreign company because these provisions are so precise that you have to follow. These are the mandates. Any kind of disobedience or any kind of bypassing of the laws, it attracts certain liabilities for the corporates. So for it to be, in the normal course of the business, you have to very well understand the provisions which are given by the Ministry of the Corporate Affairs so that there is no non-compliance of the Act, because the rules are the rules and the acts are the acts, and it is mandatory for all the corporates to follow the provisions which are entailed under the Ministry of Corporate Affairs Acts, and which is under, because of the new Act which has been passed under the Companies Act 2013. Now, there are certain words and expressions which are used not defined in these rules but defined in the Act shall have the same meaning respectively assigned to them in the Act. Every company, including its holding or subsidiary and a foreign company as well, defined under the clause 42 of section 2 of the Act, having its branch office or a project. So you have to very well understand the conceptual framework of what holding company is all about, what subsidiaries are all about, and of course if it is a foreign company, then you have to be very categorically very clear about the branch office or a project. Any office in India which fulfills the criteria specified in subsection 1 of section 135 of the Act shall comply with the provisions of section 135 of the Act and these rules, provided the net worth, turnover, net profit of a foreign company of the Act shall be computed in accordance with the balance sheet and the profit and loss account for all such company prepared in accordance with the provisions of clause of the subsection 1 of section 381 and section 198 of the Act. Every company which ceases to be a company covered under the subsection 1 of section 135 of the Act for these consecutive financial years shall not be required to constitute a CSR committee, comply with the provisions contained in section 2 of 5 of the said section till such time it meets the criteria specified in subsection 1 of section 135. So basically we are into what CSR is all about, the basic conceptual framework of what CSR committees are, etc. Now coming on to the CSR activities. The CSR activities shall be undertaken by the company as per its stated CSR policy as projects, excluding the activities undertaken in pursuance of its normal program or activities, either new or ongoing, the course of business. Now, as a matter of fact, all the students must give attention to the conceptual framework of what CSR activity constitutes. The CSR activity constitutes something beyond the normal course of the business, because as a matter of fact, if you are into a business, you are supposed to be in some kind of a routine activity, your routine, the courses of the actions which the business is taking, whether you are pursuing the continuous or an ongoing business, or you are adding some new network or new programs to your normal course of the business, CSR activity is something beyond it. CSR activity is not included in the pursuance of the normal course of the business. Not only this, the board of a company may declare and decide to undertake its CSR activities, which has to be approved by the CSR or its committees through a registered trust or a registered society or a company established by the company holdings or subsidiaries or associate company under section 8 of the Act or otherwise. So as a matter of fact, as an individual, we cannot decide what CSR activities are. We have to follow the guidelines which are entailed in the Ministry of Corporate Affairs rules which are relating to CSR by a Companies Act 2013, amendments in relation to CSR, section 135, etc. So how do we take what CSR activities is all about? As a matter of fact, you must know that there is a board of a company which decides that this is what we are adopting as a CSR activity. So it has to be completely approved by the board of directors, by the CSR and its various committees through a registered trust. That is, you have to shake hands with a trust or an NGO. The trust has to be registered under the Trust Act, and the society has to be registered under the Societies Act, and of course everything has to be approved by the board of directors, and if they say yes, you have to move on with the activity under section 8 of the Act or otherwise, provided if such act, society or a company is not established by the company or its holdings or a subsidiary or an associate company, it shall have an established track record of 3 years in undertakings the similar projects or programs. Now, here we would like to mention here, nowadays there is a big fraud which is coming up. The companies, in order to save their own money, they circulate in their own trust, their own foundations, their own societies. So, in order to escape this kind of a fraud, in order to catch this kind of a fraud, in order to arrest that kind of a fraud, the company has categorically mentioned that the NGOs, the trust societies or anybody with whom you are shaking hands shall not be a part of the company, and of course independently that company has to have a very clear record for 3 years in relation to such projects or the programs. Not only this, the company has a specified the project or a program to be undertaken through these entities, the modalities of utilization of the funds for such projects and programs, and the monitoring and the reporting mechanism. These rules are so stringent that it is not easy to bypass or any of the rules in relation to this. There is a fixed amount of the projects which are given after the screening, after the entailing of these kind of projects, and once the NGOs are clear about it, the NGOs are or the trust they clear such the asset test, only then they will be granted the projects which can help in the concluding the corporate social responsibilities. There is a X amount, say about 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 50 lakhs, 5 crores, 2 crores, 1 crores. So, that amount will be given to that particular trust or a foundation on this pretext that they have to follow the utilization, the reporting, the monitoring, etc. The pedagogies have to be defined, the modalities have to be defined, and you have to follow as an NGO, as a trust, as a foundation to follow the rules and the regulations which are categorically mentioned in these aspects. You cannot frame your own rules, you cannot break the rules, and for the CSR activities to be defined, a complete approval has to be done by the board of directors. So, as a matter of fact, the CSR activities are crystal clearly defined by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and the programs, the projects are also very crystal clearly defined. You have to see which foundation you have to shake hands with. It has to have a clear 3 years record in relation to compliance, maybe the audit reports, the annual compliance of filing the income tax. There is a 80G, the provision, there is a 12A provisions in relation to the donations, in relation to some income tax compliance. So, the corporates which are fulfilling all these, not the corporates, but the foundations or the trust or the foundations which are following or completing these aspects will be given the projects, but again you have to be very clear about how the funds have to be used, how the programs have to be furthered, how the programs have to be completed and concluded. And not only this, there is a strict, stringent phenomena in relation to monitoring and the reporting mechanism. Only then the things will be allowed to move on. Now, basically a company may also collaborate with any other company for undertaking the projects or the CSR activities in such manner that CSR committees of respective companies are in a position to report separately of such projects and programs. So, with these words, we'll take it further, the same topic coming on to what the CSR is all about and how we have to move on as far as the compliance of the CSR activities are concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajput, and we thank you all for joining us for this part of the lecture. We'll meet you after a short break and continue with the second half of the lecture. Before going on to the break, we would like to tell you, if you have any questions regarding this session, you may call us in on our toll-free number in the last 10 minutes of this session, and for that please note our toll-free number, which is 1800-110-430. Meet you after the break. Welcome back, friends. Before going on to the break, we were talking about the Ministry of Corporate Affairs and Corporate Social Responsibility, and for this topic we have with us Dr. Namita Rajput, and she was giving a great insight into the topic. We welcome back you once again, ma'am. And before going on to the lecture, we would like to tell you, if you have any questions regarding this session, you may call us on our toll-free number, which is 1800-110-430 in the last 10 minutes of the session. Let's begin with the topic.
So in the last session, we started with the corporate social responsibility rules and the regulations, and we did so many definitions about what the holding companies are, what CSR is all about, etc. So now let me start with the corporate social responsibility and move on with these sections which are relating to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs rules and the regulations as a part of the New Companies Act 2013. Every company, including its holding or a subsidiary and a foreign company defined under the clause 42 of section 2 of the Act, having its branch office or a project office in India which fulfills the criteria specified in subsection 1 of section 135 of the Act, shall comply with the provisions of section 135 of the Act and these rules, provided the net worth, the turnover, the net profits of a foreign company of the Act shall be computed in accordance with the balance sheet and the profit and loss account of such company prepared, and the profit and loss account of such company prepared in accordance with the provisions of clause A of subsection 1 of section 381 and section 198 of the Act. Every company which ceases to be a part of the companies covered under subsection 1 of section 135 of the Act for these consecutive financial years shall not be required to constitute a CSR committee, comply with the provisions contained in section 2 to 5 of the said section until such time it meets the criteria specified in subsection 1 of section 135. The CSR activities shall be undertaken by a company as its stated CSR policy, projects or excluded activities under in pursuance of its normal projects or activities either new or ongoing. As I told you, that the CSR activities cannot be a part of the normal course of the business. It is something which is beyond that. Maybe you are adopting some new business that also will not be constituted as a part of the CSR. So the activities of the CSR, they are standalone and of course not a part of the normal programs or the activities, either new or ongoing as a part of the course of the business. The board of a company may decide to undertake its CSR activities approved by the CSR or its committees through a registered trust or a registered society or a company established by the company holdings or subsidiaries or associate company under section 8 of the Act or otherwise. If any such trust, society or a company is not established by the company or its holdings or subsidiary or associate company, it shall have an established track record of 3 years in accordance of the similar programs or the projects undertaken. The company has specified the project, the program to be undertaken through these entities, the modalities of utilization of funds of such projects and the programs and the monitoring and reporting mechanism. As a matter of fact, there is a lot of surveillance on trust and NGOs these days. If you are just accepting the money and not following the bylaws, there are strict mechanism and your trust and this NGOs can be locked. You, as a matter of fact, cannot do further activities as a part of the CSR funding. A company may also collaborate with other companies for undertaking the projects or programs or CSR activities in such a manner that CSR committees of respective companies are in position to report separately on such projects or programs in accordance with these rules. Subject to provisions of subsection 5 of section 135 of the Act, the CSR projects or programs or activities undertaken in India only shall amount to CSR expenditure. The CSR projects, programs, activities that benefit only the employees of the company and their families shall not be considered as a CSR activities in accordance to section 135 of the Act. Now, I told you that there are certain activities, certain modus operandis of the corporates of today, that they are revolving around themselves only. They are circulating the money around themselves only by way of showing something for the employees of the company, etc. But the CSR projects, programs, activities that benefit only the employees, it cannot be tantamounting to a CSR activity. This is very clearly and categorically mentioned under section 135 of the Act. The companies may build a CSR capacities of their own personnel as well as of their own implementing agencies through institutions with established track record of 3 years, financial years, but such expenditure is not to exceed 5% of the total CSR expenditure of the company in one financial year. The contribution of any amount directly or indirectly to any political party under section 182 of the Act shall not be considered as a CSR activity. We are having a political scenario, political dynamism present in India. So people, they ask for donations, the political party asks for the money. So if the corporates are doing or contributing either directly or indirectly to any of the political party, this amount shall not be considered as a part of CSR. Now coming on to the second most essential part of what CSR committees are all about its constitution, about its bylaws, etc. The companies mentioned in the Rule 3 shall constitute the CSR committee as under an unlisted public company or a private company covered under the subsection 1 of section 135, which is not required to appoint an independent director pursuant to subsection 4 of section 149 of the Act, shall have its CSR committee without any such director. A private company having only 2 directors on its board shall constitute its CSR committee with 2 such directors. With respect to a foreign company covered under these rules, the CSR committee shall comprise of at least 2 persons, of which 1 person is specified under the clause D of subsection 1 of section 380 of the Act. Predominantly, any other person shall be nominated by the foreign company. The CSR committee shall constitute a transparent monitoring mechanism for implementation of the CSR projects, programs, activities undertaken by the company. Now, basically, when you talk about the CSR committee, the committees have to be, very transparent as far as the monitoring and the mechanism system of the CSR projects is concerned. Because unless and until you have the transparent system, how will you judge whether the activities they are doing is genuine or not? And for a CSR activity to be a CSR activity is very essential, and for that a transparent mechanism is definitely required to undertake such activities to be entailed under the CSR activities. And definitely now we are coming to the third most essential part of the CSR and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs bylaws mentioned under Companies Act 2013. What is CSR policy? The CSR policy of a company shall include the following, namely a list of CSR projects, programs which a company plans to undertake failing within the purview of Schedule 7 of the Act, specifying modalities of execution of such projects, programs and implementation for the same, the monitoring process of such projects or programs, provided the CSR activities does not include and undertaken in pursuance of the normal course of the business of a company and provided further the board of directors shall ensure that the activities included by a company in its corporate social responsibility policy are related to the activities included in Schedule 7 of the Act. The CSR policy of a company shall specify that the surplus arising out of the CSR projects or the programs or the activities shall not form a part of the business profit of a company. Now, what CSR expenditure is all about? The CSR expenditure shall include all expenditure including the contribution to corpus for projects, programs relating to CSR activities approved by the board on the recommendation of its CSR committee, but does not include any expenditure on any item not in conformity or not in line with the activities which will fall within the purview of section and Schedule 7 of the Act. Now coming on to the CSR reporting. Unless and until the things are reported, how will we come to know that what activities, what CSR committees have done around the year? So there are specific guidelines in relation to CSR reporting. The board report of a company covered under these rules pertaining to a financial year commencing on or a part of 1st April 2014 shall include an annual report on CSR containing a particular specified in annexure. In case of a foreign company, the balance sheet filed under the sub-clause B of subsection 1 of 2 in case section 381 shall contain an annexure regarding report on CSR. Now, you have to display a CSR activities on your website also. The board of directors of a company shall, after taking into consideration the committee, approve the CSR policy for the company, disclose the contents of such policy in its report, and the same shall be displayed on the company's website, if any, and as per the particulars specified in the annexures. Now coming on to the format for the annual report on CSR activities to be included in the board report. A brief outline of the company's CSR policy, including the overview of projects and programs proposed to be undertaken and a reference to the web link to the CSR policy and the projects or the programs. The composition of the CSR committee, the average net profits of the company for the instance 3 years financial years, prescribed CSR expenditure 2% of the amount as an item 3 and above, details of the CSR spent during a financial year, total amount to be spent in the financial year, the amount which is unspent, the manner in which the amount spent during the financial year is also detailed below. So just see this particular slide. In first is the serial number, the second is a CSR project or an activity which is identified, the third is a sector in which the project is covered, the fourth is the project or the program, first the local area, 2 the specify the state and the district where the projects or the program was undertaken, fifth the amount outlay, the budget programs, projects or the program wise, the sixth is the amount spent on the projects, the program subheads, direct expenditure on the projects or programs and the overheads, the seventh is the cumulative expenditure heard up to the reporting period, and the last is the amount spent direct or through the implementing agencies. So the total if you do is 1, 2, 3. You have to give details of the implementing agency also. In case the company has failed to spend the 2% of the average net profits of the last 3 financial years or any part thereof, the company shall provide a reason for not spending the amount in its board reports. A responsibility statement of a CSR committee that the implementation and the monitoring of the CSR policy is in compliance with the CSR objectives and the policy of the company. Now coming on to the financial statements, board's report, etc. The financial statements, including the consolidated financial statement, if any, shall be approved by the board of directors before they are signed on behalf of the board, at least by the chairperson of the company where he is authorized by the board or by the two. The directors, out of which one shall be managing director and the chief executing officer, if he is a director in a company, the chief financial officer and the company secretary of the company wherein they are appointed, or in case of one person company, only by one. The director for submission of the auditor for its report thereon. Now, the next point is the auditor's report shall be attached to every financial statement. Therefore, there shall be attached to the statements laid before a company in the general meeting. The report by its board of directors shall include the following: the financial statements, board report, etc., the extract of the annual reports returns as provided under the subsection 3 of section 92, the number of meetings of the board, director's responsibility statement, a statement on declaration given by the independent director under the subsection, and sixth of section 149. In case of a company covered under the subsection 1 of the section 178, the company's policy or director's appointment and remuneration, including the criteria for determining the qualifications, the positive attributes, independence of a director, and other matters, provided under subsection 3 of section 178. The explanations or the comments by the board of equal qualification, reservation, etc. on adverse remarks or disclaimer made by the auditor in his report, by the company secretary in practice, and in his secretarial audit report. The particulars of loan, guarantees or investments under section 186. The particulars of the contract or arrangement with the relaxed parties referred to in subsection 1 of section 188 in prescribed form, the state of the company's affairs, the amount, if any, if it proposes to carry to be any reserve, the amount, if any, which it recommends shall be and should be paid by way of dividend, the material changes in the commitment, if any, affecting the financial position of the company, which have occurred between the end of the financial year of the company to which the financial statements relate and the date of the report. The conservation of the energy, technology, absorption, foreign exchange earnings ought to go in such manner as the case may be prescribed. A statement indicating the development and implementation of a risk management policy of the company, including a identification thereon of elements of risk, if any, which in the opinion of the board may be threaten the existence of the company. The details about the policy developed and the implementation by the company on the corporate social responsibility initiatives taken during the period. In case of a listed company and every other public company having such paid up share capital as may be prescribed, the statement indicating the manner in which the formal annual evaluation has been made by the board of directors of its own performance, and of course of the committees and the individual directors. Such other matters as may be prescribed. The report of the board of directors to be attached to the financial statements under the section shall have, in case of one person company, means a report containing an explanation or the comments by the board on equal qualification, reservation or adverse remarks or a disclaimer made by the auditor in his report. The director responsibility statement referred to in clause C of subsection 3 shall have the state that in preparation of the annual accounts, the application account statements and standards had been followed along with the proper explanation relating to the material and the departures. The directors had selected such account policies and applied them consistently and made the judgments and establishes that they are reasonable and prudent so as to give a true and a fair view of the statement of affairs of the company at the end of the financial statement and the year, and of course of the profit and the loss of the company for particular that period. The directors had taken a proper and a sufficient care for the maintenance of adequate accounting records in accordance with the provisions of the Act, for safeguarding the assets of the company and for preventing and detecting the fraud and other irregularities. The directors had prepared the annual accounts on an ongoing concern basis. The directors, in case of the listed company, had laid down the internal financial controls to be followed by the company, and as such the internal financial controls are adequate with the opening effectively. Now, there are certain explanations which are given for the purpose of this clause. The term internal financial statements, the control means the policies and the procedures adopted by the company for ensuring the orderly and efficient conduct of its business, including the adherence to the company. The policies, the safeguarding of its assets, preventing the detection of the frauds, errors, the accuracy of the completeness of the accountancy records and are timely prepared of the reliable financial information. The directors had devised a proper system to ensure the compliance with the provisions of all applicable laws, and as such they were adequate and operating effectively. Now, the next is the board report and the annexures thereafter under subsection 3 of Act shall be signed by a chairperson of the company if he is authorized by the board, and where he is not so authorized shall be signed by at least 2 directors. One of them shall be a managing director or the director where there is only one director. A signed copy of every financial statement, including the consolidated financial statement if any, shall be issued directly, circulated, published along with a copy of such any notes annexed to a forming part of such financial statements, the auditor's report, the board's report under the subsection 3. And if a company contravenes to the provisions of this Act, the company shall be punishable with a fine which shall be not less than 50,000 rupees, by which may extend to 25 lakh rupees, and every officer who is in default shall be punishable with an imprisonment term which may extend to 3 years, or with a fine which shall be not less than 50,000 but may be extended to 5 lakhs, or with both. So, you have to be very careful about the overall responsibilities which as a matter of fact as far as the CSR policies are concerned you have to follow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajput. And we hope that you get a great insight into the CSR policies and how Ministry of Corporate Affairs are forming those policies. Friends, if you have any suggestions or questions regarding this session, you may write into us on our mail ID. For that, please note our mail ID, which is info.cec@nic.in. We'll meet with Dr. Rajput with some other topic or a great insight into management things. With that, we take a break. We thank you all for watching us.